My name is Sophia Nkrumah, and this morning, the CEO who called me a thief in front of the entire company is realizing that the man standing behind me doesn't just hold my heart, he holds the deed to every building this corporation owns. There is a quiet, cinematic beauty in watching a pack of wolves realize they've tried to prey on a lioness protected by a king. In the glass towers of Boston, they thought they could use my Ghanaian heritage and my silence as a shield for their own corruption. They were wrong. Have you ever been blamed for a mistake that wasn't yours, just because you were the easiest target? Tell me your story in the comments. I have spent 10 years building a reputation as a meticulous compliance officer. I am a woman of rules, ethics, and unwavering integrity. I grew up in Accra, raised by a grandfather who taught me that a name is the only thing you truly own, and once it is tarnished, you are a ghost. When I moved to Boston and joined Vanguard Wealth Management, I thought I was part of a prestigious legacy. I didn't realize I was merely a convenient scapegoat for a group of executives who were bleeding the firm dry through offshore shadow accounts. The day of my execution was orchestrated with surgical cruelty. The CEO, a man named Sterling Vance, called an all-hands meeting in the atrium. In front of 300 colleagues, he projected a series of forged documents onto the massive screens, documents that bore my digital signature, suggesting I had embezzled $5 million. "Sophia, we trusted you with the keys to our moral compass," Vance said, his voice dripping with theatrical disappointment. "But it seems you are more interested in enriching yourself at the expense of our clients. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. We have already notified the authorities. I suggest you go back to wherever it is you came from and stay there." I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I stood in the center of that atrium, a tall, dark-skinned woman in a sharp navy suit, and I let the silence settle. I saw the pity in some eyes and the hidden malice in others. I turned and walked out of the building with nothing but my handbag, leaving my 10-year career in the trash. I knew that in their eyes, I was finished. A foreign woman accused of high-level fraud has no future in Boston finance. But Sterling Vance made one fatal mistake. He assumed I was alone. 1 week later, I returned. I didn't come back with a lawyer, and I didn't come back with a plea. I came back with Julian Cross. To the public, Julian is the enigmatic head of a private equity firm that specializes in distressed assets. To the men who truly run the city, he is the American Mafia boss who dismantles empires with a single phone call. He is a man of cold, calculated power, a man who believes that loyalty is the only currency that never devalues. We walked through the lobby of Vanguard Wealth Management as if we owned the air. Julian was dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, his presence so heavy it seemed to dim the lights. The security guards, who had been instructed to bar me from the building, took one look at the two men walking behind Julian, men with the build of granite and the eyes of predators, and stepped aside without a word. We entered the boardroom mid-meeting. Sterling Vance and the board of directors were celebrating their clean slate. When they saw me, Vance let out a sharp, arrogant laugh. "Sophia, you have a lot of nerve showing your face here. And who is this? Your bodyguard? Intimidation won't work here. The evidence is already with the SEC." Julian didn't look at Vance. He pulled out a chair for me at the head of the table, then leaned over the mahogany surface, his blue eyes turning into shards of ice. "My name is Julian Cross," he said, his voice a low, dangerous velvet. "And I don't intimidate, Mr. Vance. I audit. And when I find a discrepancy, I don't just fire people, I erase them." The board members exchanged nervous glances. They knew the name Julian Cross. They knew he was the man who had quietly liquidated 3 rival firms in the last year alone. "We don't care who you are," Vance blurted out, though his hands were shaking as he reached for his water glass. "The paperwork is signed. Sophia Nkrumah is a fraud." "Is she?" I asked, speaking for the first time. I opened a leather portfolio and laid out a series of transcripts. "Because while you were busy forging my signature on those embezzlement files, you forgot that I had already installed a secondary compliance monitor, one that records every keystroke made in the executive wing. I didn't just find the fraud, Sterling. I found the recordings of the meetings where you and the board planned to frame me." Julian tapped a button on his phone. A digital recording began to play through the boardroom's high-end speakers. It was Vance's voice, clear as a bell. The Ghanaian woman is perfect. She's quiet, she's an outsider, and no one will question it when we pin the missing 5 million on her. Just make sure the signature looks authentic. The color drained from Vance's face. He looked like a man watching his own funeral. That's a deep fake. It's inadmissible. Actually, Julian said, standing up and smoothing his jacket, it's a federal confession. You see, I spent the last 7 days buying up the majority of Vanguard's outstanding debt. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I am the primary creditor and the de facto owner of this firm. And as my first act of ownership, I've invited some friends to join us. The doors opened and 4 federal agents stepped in. They didn't need to say a word. The look on Julian's face told the story. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an extraction. Sterling Vance, the lead agent said, you and the members of this board are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the boardroom, once a place of arrogant power, became a tomb. Vance looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. I didn't give him the satisfaction of an angry word. I simply watched as they were led out of the building they had disgraced. Julian turned to me, his expression softening into the only version of himself that the world was never allowed to see. The truth has a way of rising, Sophia. I just made sure it had a clear path. Thank you, Julian, I whispered. Don't thank me, he replied, taking my hand. You did the work. I just balanced the books. The aftermath was a masterpiece of poetic justice. The news of the scandal broke, but the narrative had changed. I wasn't the thief. I was the whistleblower who had brought down a corrupt empire. Julian oversaw the restructuring of the firm, ensuring that every cent stolen from the clients was returned. He offered me the position of CEO, but I declined. I didn't want to run a company built on the bones of liars. Instead, I started my own firm, one built on the principles my grandfather taught me in Accra. I remember sitting in my new office a month later, looking out over the Boston harbor. The water was a deep, restless blue, mirroring the strength I had found in myself. Julian walked in, carrying a bouquet of white lilies, the national flower of Italy, a nod to the elegance he admired in me. The federal takeover is complete, he said, sitting on the edge of my desk. Vance is looking at 20 years. The others are turning on each other like rats. I don't feel happy about their pain, I said honestly. I just feel peaceful. That's because you're a woman of grace, Sophia, he said, kissing my knuckles. And grace always wins the long game. I realized then that my journey from Ghana to the heights of Boston finance hadn't been about proving my worth to men like Vance. It had been about finding the people who saw my worth without me having to say a word. Julian hadn't saved me. He had simply stood by me while I saved myself. He was the power that allowed my truth to be heard. The cinematic force that turned a tragedy into a triumph. Vanguard Wealth Management is a name that will eventually be forgotten, a footnote in a history of greed. But my name, Sophia Nkrumah, is a name that stands for something unshakable. I am no longer a compliance officer following someone else's rules. I am the architect of my own destiny, protected by a man who treats my honor as his most precious asset. The world is full of people who think they can use your identity, your gender, or your origin as a weapon against you. They think that because you are quiet, you are weak. They think that because you are different, you are disposable. But they forget that the quietest rivers are the deepest, and the most elegant souls are often the ones with the most powerful allies. As the sun sets over the city, I feel a sense of closure that is absolute. The scandal that was meant to destroy me became the fire that forged me. I am safe, I am respected, and I am loved by a man who would move heaven and earth to ensure I never have to lower my gaze again. Justice isn't always a loud explosion. Sometimes it's just the sound of a door closing on the past and a new one opening to a future where the truth is the only currency that matters. I am Sophia Nkrumah, and I am exactly where I am meant to be. The board is clear, the power is balanced, and for the first time in my life, the air I breathe is perfectly, beautifully pure. I look at Julian, and I see the man who watched the world try to break me and decided to break the world instead. We walk out of the office together, two shadows merging into one against the twilight. The city of Boston continues its frantic pace, but for us, time has slowed down to a perfect rhythmic beat. We have won, not through chaos, but through the calm, relentless application of truth. And that, I've learned, is the most powerful mafia of all. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more mafia love and justice stories. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.